Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Builds Harem with Nami and Robin Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Listen up men. Fake Luffy, now fully recovered, pronounced before a crowd of pirates. You may not know Theseus' face now, but from here on out every one of you is a member of my crew, the Straw Hat Pirates. Once I become the king of the pirates, the imposter continued. You guys are going to be crew of the Pirate King. And for that goal you all will serve as my arms and legs in the adventure that are to come. All the pirates cheered by the fake Luffy's words. It's like a dream come true, said one pirate. I can't believe we get joined the notorious crew of the man who destroyed Enies lobby, created chaos at Impel Down, and charged into the heart of the Whitebeard War. This legendary pirate is going to be our captain, another cheered. He's really a candidate for the title of Pirate King. But before we set sail for the new world, fake Luffy continued, biting off every single word as if it were flint, we need to teach those a lesson for disrespecting me. And one of them is known as Burning Will, Uzumaki D. Naruto. For a terrifying second, there was silence. It was deafening. Like a mighty wave. So too his words rippled out amongst those that had assembled to become his subordinates, plastering their faces with expressions of shock, awe, and in exceptionally rare cases, fear. There wasn't a single pirate alive that hadn't heard that name. All the pirates gawped at their captain and what he'd just said. Burning Will, Uzumaki D. Naruto. They thought he was joking, such were their expressions. Monkey D. Luffy wanted revenge. On the only man who had dared to murder not one, not two, but 3 Tenryubito and escape with hundreds upon hundreds of slaves, not to mention equally priceless treasures and artifacts, and invaded Impel Down, no less. The infamous rookie who, given enough time, might very well fill the vacancy left by Edward Newgate, one of the 4 now reduced to 3 Yonko. Their captain wanted the head of Burning Will brought before him like some spoil of war. No way. Impossible. Truly, if there was a man more terrifying than Straffut Luffy, then Burning Will clearly fit the bill. At length, members of the newly reformed Straffut pirates began to murmur amongst themselves, with a complete and utter lack of regard to captain's orders. Burning Will, Uzumaki D. Naruto. Gashed, Albion, another of the rookie pirates joining the imposter Straw Hat Pirates, repeated in a shocked tone. Damn, that makes my bounty of $92 million berries look like chump change. No way, gasped Lip, Service, Doughty, another rookie pirate whose head was worth $88 million. He's here in Sabayati Archipelago. But though he vanished forever, one of the pirates said, quaking with fear. This is not good, another pirate answered fearfully. That guy tends to attract an admiral from miles away. Which mean there a marine admiral may be on his way here by now, a third pirate cried out. But there's more. Fake Luffy brayed, wheezing in a brash tone that would make even a donkey cringe. Now there's only one reason I gathered you all here today. Some low-life scumbags claim to be his friends, and, as such, they too, have had the nerve to disrespect me, your beloved boss. And they are still somewhere here in the archipelago. I want you to hunt them down, and drag them, kicking and screaming to me. And then that so-called legend will come running over here like the fool he is. Gyahahaha. You mean if we hostages, Burning Will won't harm us? A stray voice murmured. That's right. Someone stammered. If we take his friends captive, then there's no way he'd lay so much as a finger on us. Yeah. Their logic continued to degenerate further, much to the ire of a single pirate among them. He watched the fools bolster themselves with false hope, with the delusion that, by taking hostages, their lives could somehow be spared from the wrath of the man who'd once burned an entire island to ashes in a fit of rage. The fools. They had no idea, their lives, would soon be made forfeit. Kami, may you have mercy on the fools. cackled a man of such infamy, that those around him, his brother included, shivered in fear. Blood spatterer, Caribou displayed no such fear. He, with a bounty of $210 million berries, did not fear the reputation of the man who rumor has it had once fought off this likes of Admiral Kizaru himself and managed to escape from Akainu with only superficial injuries. Nay, this pirate did not fear this man, because fear was an emotion as alien to him as mercy and kindness were any pirate, only more so. He too remained utterly ignorant of the man with the fake mustache being led toward them by fake Zoro and fake Sanji. So fixated was he upon Burning Will, in fact, that for the moment, that he even forgot to bury the Marine scout that had, oh so foolishly, tried to shoot him not an instant ago. He left that man's fate up to his brother, Karibo, and those of his faithful pirate crew, while he waited and watched and willed away the minutes with his wily plotting. So you've come at last, Burning Will. His eyes were filled with hatred, his soul with vengeance. Yes, by all means, come. Come here, Burning Will, to Grove number 46. Because I'll be waiting. And this time, I'll finally have my revenge for what you did to me all those years ago. Meanwhile, Achu. Many miles from Grove number 46, Naruto suddenly sneezed. Bless you. Robin chimed pleasantly. Ah, thanks. Naruto raised his gaze to meet her own. It was a mistake. Once again, he was stricken speechless. He took in the large eyes, perfectly coiffed hair, clear skin, full lips, and lean, firm curves, and he marveled at her. Hers was a beauty beyond describing, but, ultimately, it was the eyes that ensnared him. Her eyes were cool, twin pools of crystal blue, not unlike his own. Hers were eyes that knew pain, but at some point that pain had been taken to pieces, it had been dissected, disassembled, examined from every angle, and then, summarily conquered. Despite all the majesty her eyes held, keeping his gaze focused upon her face was quickly proving to be its own a trial, thanks in part to the open blouse and the glorious sight that lay within. Naruto felt his cheeks inexplicably darken as a result. Then he chastised himself with a shake of the head. He was a pirate for Crisix. So why couldn't he stop staring at a pair of. Haven't we been through this already? Once more, her voice gently tugged him from his reverie. Once more, it wasn't for very long. He had a fleeting glimpse of her face, then the details swarmed him like a plague of locusts, devouring what little restraint that he had left. The sudden lack of tension triggered the fire within, and suddenly, he inexplicably, undeniably, hot. He felt the flames boil in his body, his blood, and, with great effort, he quelled them. Pushed them back down, so that he might focus on the task at hand. The woman had a gentle look about her, and it was then, in that instant, that Naruto realized the identity of this buxom beauty. Unlike Frankie, she was instantly recognizable, because the last 2 years had done little to diminish her beauty. On the contrary, time had only enhanced it. She smiled softly, and ultimately, it was that dangerous, deadly smile that sealed his fate and won his heart all over again. It was then in the silence, as her eyes entreated him for an answer, that Burning Will could hold his tongue no longer. It had been years since he'd seen her last, that last little fleeting glimpse of her smile, her words, having etched itself into his memory forever. Now, his own words threatened to overwhelm him. Say something. Something. Anything at all, you blasted fool. Just stop standing there. Stop gawping at her like she's a piece of meat. It's been a long time, Naruto. Whump. Naruto took the words like a blow to the gut. The air rushed out of him, taking all manner of tension and anxiety with it. Gone. It was all gone. Gone was the strain. Gone was the pressure. Gone was the urge to prove himself, to demonstrate unto her that he was not the same strange, stupid, foolish boy he'd been when they'd first met in Alabasta, because now he was more. So much more, so much the better for it, and still so very much in love with the woman standing before him. Immediately, he dismissed these thoughts as folly. They were feelings from his past. A past he'd left behind. But perhaps. No. He mercilessly slammed the lid on that train of thought before it unraveled any further. Renewed desperation coursed through him, scouring him clean like those great and all-consuming flames that had been a part of him for the last 2 years. Searing fire lanced through his chest and, in that instant, he ached. He plucked at the strands, struggling to knit what remained together, to reassemble his thoughts so that he might finally break this dreadful silence. My apologies. Naruto gasped out in a rush, suddenly abashed at having rehashed his actions for so long. It has been quite some time since I've seen you last. She smiled, and in that instant his heart ached. It has, hasn't it? You're looking well. It was the first compliment he could think to say, and at once, he regretted it. I could say the same of you. Robin supplied calmly. Burning Will, Uzumaki D. Naruto. Naruto felt his cheeks darken, and not just from shame. Here, standing here before him, was a woman. A woman with such a figure that a goddess would turn green. She was beautiful and she was lovely, in all aspects of the word. Few, if any, could hope to be a match for her in terms of appearance, let alone grace. Even Boa Hancock, the great pirate empress herself, might be hard-pressed to outdo such a bodacious beauty. She'd been beautiful the last time he'd seen her. Now, she was drop-dead gorgeous. There were no hidden truth in her words now, as there had been in Alabasta. Robin remained brutally honest, if a tad polite, although her years with the Strafuts might have tempered the strange, tempestuous creature she'd once been, years before. He needed to say something. Anything. How have you been? He asked, and immediately cursed himself for the words thereafter. Damneedle. He'd read the papers. He'd seen the devastating aftermath of the Buster call upon Eni's lobby. There was no knowing what kind of trauma that must have put her through. And then, after all that, to be separated from her nakama for not 1, but 2 years, was too much to ask of anyone. Especially Nico Robin. Well, she acased, the corners of her lips turning up in an expression that was not quite a smile, not quite a frown. I've been well. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Naruto would have been content to have that silence last, had it simply stayed that way. To have simply allowed this moment to exist, would have been truly wonderful, to work out whatever differences still lay between them. He just wanted it to last, for a little while longer. It did not. Frankie had to go and ruin it all by jacking his jaw. Oh, he shouted. What's going on here? How do you know this guy, Robin? The archaeologist of the Strafut Pirates shook her head lightly, the motion sending a wave of raven hair cascading down her back. For a moment her eyes lingered, locking within and caging his heart forever. Then she turned aside, gracing him with a smile for the first time in what felt like to him a truly long time. Whatever trespass he had first committed, whatever mistakes he had made on the road to Shabandi Archipelago, he could see them all, in her eyes. He saw them all, every flaw, every error, every one of the men and women who'd laid their lives down for his sake so that might arrive here, to this moment, and he knew that their sacrifices had not been for naught. It was worth it. Frankie. Meet, Burning Will, also known as Uzumaki Naruto. He saw it in her eyes and the soft, not quite shy smile that bespelled her lips. Whatever sleight of hand that had first caused them to part ways, apparently she bore him no ill will over it. Good. The last thing he wanted was to make an enemy. All was forgiven. Burning Will. Frankie gawped in disbelief. Oh, you actually know this super guy. This is that guy, Burning Will, in the flesh. Unless you'd like me to charbroil what's left of yours, I suggest you be silent. Naruto snapped back, irate at the pervert cyborg that nearly broken his knuckle only moments before. He wouldn't be making that mistake again. Maker preserve me, if I hear one more word out of your mouth, I swear all. You're looking for Luffy, aren't you? Naruto made a squelching sound. He already knew who had asked the question. When he turned to greet it, Robin was looking at him expectantly, arms folded, eyes oddly distant. Almost as if she were staring through him, past him, and a ways beyond him. He wanted to turn, wanted to follow her gaze, but sheer astoundment prevented him from doing such. How on earth had she known that he'd been searching the archipelago for Luffy, this entire time? He hadn't even told her that. Gay, how did you know I was looking for him? He ventured. Woman's intuition. Was that a hint, just a hint of smug satisfaction in the pools of her eyes? Naruto did not doubt it to be so. Perhaps the old Nico Robin was in there somewhere, after all. She'd certainly held onto that stereotypical confidence of which she'd been so proud. Why not relish the chance to trump him, as she'd just done so now with little to no effort? Bah! Women gave him a headache. But that was not the reason for which he had come to Shibandi. So is he here? Naruto asked, suddenly eager. Luffy, I mean, if he is, I really need to. Unfortunately, he isn't. Robin's answer sent his spirits plummeting, but only briefly. Not yet, that is. I'm the 8th to arrive. Luffy should be arriving any day now. May I ask why you're so interested in meeting him, Naruto-kun? Well, there was that eating contest in Alabasta, and that's not the point, he shouted. You're distracting me again, damn it. I'm not here because of that. My reasons are my own and that's the way they'll stay. Robin laughed softly. You haven't changed at all, have you? Oh, yes I have. Naruto answered, eyes darkening with anger. In fact, I can show you how much I've changed right now. Hold it. Now what? Naruto painted indifference onto his face, despite the storm brewing behind his eyes. It was Frankie. The cyborg had remained silent thus far, apparently content to let the two have their moment, but now, he'd decided to intervene. He loomed over Burning Will with shoulders squared, forearms practically bristling in frustration. Naruto leered up at the perverted bot for a moment longer before honoring him with a secondary response. Say, you wouldn't happen to know where Luffy is, would you, Frankie-san? Nope. Frankie answered stiffly. Usopp and Sanji have been here already. Usopp's out to get fuel, and Sanji's stocking us up on fuel. However, he drawled angrily, something's been bothering me for a while now. You keep telling us you're Burning Will, but you keep asking for Luffy. How do we know you're not some sort of government spy or something, huh? Frankie, Robin began, that's enough. So you doubt me, Naruto wasn't having any of it. Squaring his jaw, he took a small step forward. You doubt what you've been told then, Frankie? As if. Frankie growled, I just don't trust you. I knew it. Naruto fired back, then that means you don't trust Robin, either. I'm more than willing to take Nico Robin at her word. Frankie retorted, put on the defensive by the blonde's explosive retort. However, just because she says you're who I think you are, doesn't guarantee you're the real deal. Amaterasu. Naruto summoned the flames back to the surface of his skin, turning his cloak to ash. They devoured the arms of his cloak with tongues of black flame and then the rest of it, exposing heavily bandaged forearms, the like of which were laced with strange black markings, barely seen beneath the bandages. With the destruction of his cloak, everything about him was revealed, as were the bulky protestions that had been bound to his back. He was a spiky blonde young man with fox-like whiskers, sapphiric blue eyes, very handsome in addition. He was very tall, with an athletic outline. He was wearing an orange sleeveless coat, black short-sleeve shirt and pants, red gloves and boots. He was carrying two swords behind him, one a katana the other a wakizashi, both of which, now wreathed in flame with their master. Naruto was eerily aware of the entranced looks the resurgence of his given element had brought. Frankie looked as if he'd just busted a cog. Likewise, Robin's expression was equally stunned, but even as he looked on, her surprise began melting, molding into something else, something he daren't give thought to. No, he forced his emotions back down. Now is not the time. No. Willfully, He banished the flames from his body. Satisfied, he asked Frankie, folding his legs and dropping into a squat between the two of them. The last of the flames spurted from his body and dissipated, turning to quiet ash upon the deck, and then they too were gone into the afternoon. Because I won't be doing that again. For a moment there was silence, and in that silence, he gauged at best their reactions. From Robin, he sensed amusement. Frankie, well, finally, Frankie recovered his voice. That was. Naruto grimaced. So help me if you say what I think you're about to say. Super. Arg. 2 of 3 things happened in that instant. First, Naruto twisted from the crouch into which he'd fallen, and flung himself at Frankie. Second, Robin burst out in laughter, and third, a very familiar, very unamused voice rang out on the hill just above the Thousand Sunny. So loud was it, that it caused both pirates to immediately cease their squabble and turn toward the source of the sound. Naruto detected a blur of orange hair in his parafiles before everything went straight to shit. Something very fast, very large, and very solid crashed into his back and sent him sprawling. His head kissed an iron-hard board and black spots speckled before his vision. By then, he'd already phased out of existence, his body turning to flames as whatever it was came around for a second pass. Imagine his surprise when the rinder careened off of him and careened into the railing of Thousand Sunny, stunning itself for a moment. What the hell is a reindeer doing here? And that moment was all he needed. He simply tracked with the motion, took aim, and fired. Dos fleur. Suddenly, the reindeer was gone. A pair of hands wrested him away from the ensuing gust of flame, instead hurtling up the mast and out of harm's way. Naruto hesitated for a moment, fearful of further endangering the Thousand Sunny any more than he already had. Confusion warred with wrath as he rounded on Nico Robin, a round of expletives and questions already forming on his lips. Robin, what the hell are you doing? Oi, Robin, get down. Naruto half turned, his eyes flying wide and large as he picked himself off the deck. Almost immediately thereafter, a strange-looking projectile skittered across the deck. With a deafening hiss reminiscent of a boiler exploding, a giant Venus flytrap reared up before him seconds later, jaws wide and gaping as they closed around him. Not an instant after the fact, a bold bolt of fire ravaged its roots to the core, eviscerating the carnivorous plant beyond any hope of survival. Bothersome weed. He hissed, curling his nose at the noxious smells the creature gave at its sudden departure from the land of the living. Within seconds, it and its brethren, foul-smelling and all, had been reduced to little more than dried husks upon the deck. He didn't even bother to turn when the great hulking fist of Frankie came hurtling toward his head, because he'd already caught it, not even bothering to become intangible. You're awfully quick to attack me, Frankie. He mused, his expression turning thoughtful. Why is that? You know damn well why. Naruto shook his head. Actually, I don't know. But, Frankie, you should know. He drew the cyborg close, a sly smile flitting across his features. That I don't pull my punches. He didn't pull this one, either. Flames licked across Naruto's fist, wreathing his wrist in fire. He clenched his fingers and they erupted, spreading outward in an orange discharge so violently sudden, that the infamous shipwright likely saw little more than a red-white blur before the debilitating blow struck. When he finally came to, he realized that not only had he been ejected from the Thousand Sunny, but now, one of the Yukimaran mangroves was upside down, seeing as Frankie himself was wedged within one of them. Even as he struggled to free himself from the sappy tree, he was forgotten. Naruto was already moving on to his next target. As he'd suspected, a steadily darkening cloud was indeed forming above him, burgeoned by a series of red and blue spheres sweeping upward into the stang nimbus. Lightning crackled from within its depths, popping many of the resin bubbles surrounding the Sunny. The coating itself remained all but unbreached, but there was absolutely no guarantee it would remain as such. His fingers flexed for the second time. Heiken. The compressed fist of fire expanded with alarming speed, erupting upward from the thousand sunny in a veritable ring of flames, so searing, so intense, that they veritably obliterated the gathering clouds above it, clouds that should not have been forming in the first place. He didn't have the time to admire his handiwork. Yet another strange plant was already sprouting behind him, crumpling before the first, so he hadn't the time to see who'd launched the weather-manipulating attack. Naruto was still in the process of extricating himself from its withered jaws when he caught sight of the sniper. Robin was shouting something at him, but he paid it little heed, shoving his forward with such force that a wall of superheated air rushed forth from the motion. It hurtled upward towards its target, the offending sniper blissfully unaware of the massive hurt that was headed his way. Stop. He registered the words as if through a haze, and turned, wondering who it was that dared to shout at him so. They were under attack. There was no reason for anyone to be shouting at him, least of all her. And still, he couldn't help but wonder. Stop. Naruto. Stop. Robin's words finally reached him, just as he saw who the supposed sniper was. He also saw who was standing beside him, her flaming orange hair too much of a dead giveaway to be mistaken for anyone other than whom she was. And the blast was hurtling toward them both. Too late, he realized his mistake. Too late, when he realized whom he was about to attack, about to incinerate, about to kill, he saw his folly and understood. Shit. He tried to pull back the blast, but it was too late. He could only watch as the invisible column of boiling current hurtled through the atmosphere, a harbinger of doom and destruction for its unwitting target. A target that was never reached, because a blade sliced through the fire and the flames as though they were butter, sundering and severing them, raining down in a series of soft sparkling embers, bringing no harm to Nami or Usopp, leaving the sparks to sputter, then die. Naruto could feel several pairs of eyes boring into his back save for Robin, each sporting a withering glare, but he was already repentant for his deeds. Shame, embarrassment, and disbelief washed him to his toes. What was that just now? He hadn't gone off like that since Marioa. He shuddered with revulsion at the memory. All that blood, so much blood, bloody bodies everywhere, and then had come the rage, the deep, all-consuming fury that had swept him up and splattered the world a deep, impregnable scarlet. Looks like we made it in time, after all. A smooth voice wafted across the clearing toward them, gently plucking the blonde from his bloody reverie. For that, he was grateful more than any of the Strafuts knew. He held no desire to revisit those darkened days of memory and misery. Relieved to have something with which to preoccupy himself, his attention shifted toward the small hillock from which the voice, and Nami's disbelieving cry, had come. Rayleigh-san. There, standing upon a small hillock, were Silver's Rayleigh and Shikuyaku. To Nami, Usopp, and Tony Chopper, Silver's Rayleigh and Shaki looked exactly the same as they had 2 years ago. Silver's Rayleigh a handsome old man who was wearing his glasses, and Shaki a slim and tall woman with short black hair, 2 tufts pointing upwards, and, as always, she was smoking a cigarette. To Naruto, they looked like a pair of complete strangers. Powerful, complete strangers. Of course, everyone knew the name, Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh, but this was Naruto's first time seeing the man, bearing witness to the living legend live and in person. That man had just sundered the powers of the Mara no Mi as if they were nothing. That, if nothing else, demanded respect, and warranted caution to the highest degree. If he engaged this man, even in his advanced age, Naruto knew that he would not emerge unscathed. He couldn't afford a battle like that. Now, not with an admiral at his heels and the world government breathing down his neck. Surely they'd gotten wind of his arrival by now. Meaning, that his window of opportunity for finding Monkey D. Luffy was about to slam shut in his face. That, and that thought alone, stayed his hand. Silver's Rayleigh. His voice conveyed none of the awe he felt, being in the presence of this magnificent man. Didn't expect to see you taking center stage. Turning toward the Strafuts, most of whom were either stunned or outright irate, he did the only thing that might possibly remedy the situation. An act of insolence so demanding, so great, that it could shatter the core of his being and shake his very soul. All of you, listen up. He barked loudly. I have something to say and you're going to hear me out. Unceremoniously, he knelt. Uzumaki D. Naruto, the man known as Burning Will, the man who'd raided Marieoa, freed thousands upon thousands of slaves, penetrated the impenetrable undersea gall known as Impel Down, the man whose bounty was superseded only by that of Monkey D. Luffy himself took a knee. He reached around to the matchless blades that adorned his back, and laid them on the deck at his feet, careful to remain facing away from Robin as he did so, genuflecting before the Strafut pirates as a whole. Hear me, Strafuts. He began slowly. My name is Uzumaki D. Naruto, son of Minato and Kushina. Some of you might also know me as Burning Will. My bounty is that of $350 million berry for various crimes and offenses, some of which are so terrible that they have been stricken from the history of the world itself. For the past 2 years, I've been training, honing my skills and abilities, and searching. Searching for all of you. He paused, letting his statement hang, unadorned between the lot of them. One by one he read their expressions, his gaze falling first to Nami, then Chopper, Usopp, Frankie, and finally, Robin. Shock, dismay, horror, confusion, and amusement. Then his attention shifted, sweeping toward Rayleigh and Shaggy, noting that both the former and latter were entirely too pleased by his actions. Though that struck him as odd, the Strafuts hadn't attacked him yet. That was good. What he said next would truly test their mettle, as well as his own. He was choking on his own pride as it was, bowing before them and offering his swords in deference. Truly, it went against his better judgment to demean himself in such a manner, but demean he did and continued. Now that I've finally found you, after all these years, I have something that I must ask of you. But I warn you, consider your situation carefully before you give your answer, because if you should refuse my offer, then I promise you, I will be a formidable enemy to you all, should you ever cross me. He felt the tension spike at that, and it occurred to him that they might indeed attack him after all. They might perceive his actions as a threat and forego any means of parley on his part, if he pressed the matter further. It was a risk he had been born to take. Willing himself to be calm, to speak slowly, and coherently, Naruto forged on ahead. But I digress. I have not come here to quarrel. He bowed his head further, nearly scraping the grass turf of the deck. Quite the contrary, I believe that the proposition that I am about to offer you will be mutually beneficial to all. Every word boiled in his gut, every syllable brought him one step closer to shattering the facade he'd worked so hard to project outward, if not for his sake, then their own. The next sentence tore a hollow hole inside his gut. I hereby humbly ask permission to join your crew. The silence was deafening. Shock had wiped their faces clean. Even Rayleigh and Shaggy seemed to be at a loss for words, such was the audacity of Naruto's proposal. Only Nico Robin remained unfazed throughout, though her expression also remained torn somewhere between stoic and chastened. Naruto did not move from his position, intent to await them and their decision, should it be made in his favor. Then, Nani, I thought this might happen, said Rayleigh. Now, why don't we all sit down and talk about this? What's there to talk about, Rayleigh-san? Usopp cried in disbelief. You heard what he said. He's killed people. He almost killed us. And now he wants to join our crew. No way. Absolutely not. There's no way in hell that I'm letting this guy anywhere near Luffy. I heard about you, Tony Chopper said fearfully as he cowered behind Usopp. You're the one that attacked Impel Down, burned down Marieoa, and murdered 3 world nobles. Scary. You're a scary guy. There's no way, no how, can you be in our crew? No way. Frankie seconded. The new, armored me, wants nothing to do with this guy. Nothing at all. Ah, Chopper gawped, his fear momentarily forgotten, as was that of Usopp. Frankie. Is that you? OWWWWH. It sure is. Frankie laughed boisterously. But we'll save that for later. Right now we need to decide what to do with this bastard. Naruto's sweat dropped, wondering if Frankie had conveniently forgotten the brutal beating he had received only moments before. There would be no deciding of anything, he reminded himself. He'd finally found the Thousand Sunny, and he planned to stay with the Thousand Sunny, until he found, and presented, his offer to Luffy. Until then, he wouldn't be budged. Even if everyone denounced him and spat at him and refused to allow him in the crew. I think we should give him a chance to prove himself. Robin interjected politely. That one threw him for a loop and half. He'd half expected a vehement refusal on her part if anything else. Her support, though marginal, suddenly meant the world to him. He caught her gaze, suddenly aware that she was smiling, as if she found the disbelief and confusion of her crewmates to be the most natural thing in the world. Yes, her smile seemed to say, I accept you. Yes, it said, I forgive you. Yes, it assured him, I want you to be a part of this crew. He had no idea what he'd done to warrant such kindness, but he knew at once that he didn't deserve it. He was rotten to the core. He hadn't freed those slaves because of any righteous bullshit. It had simply been a bit of temporary insanity. A bout of foul morality. A horrifying fit of decency, that was all, he told himself. And then Usopp had to go and muck it up. Robin. Usopp spluttered loudly, with Chopper nodding emphatically all the while. Did you not see what he did to us back there? He tried to kill us. He nearly burned down the Thousand Sunny while he was trying to do it, too. He didn't attack me, Robin said pointedly, as if this solved everything. Well, I guess he didn't attack you, but, to be honest with you guys, Naruto said in an honest tone as he stood woodenly, not taking enough care. When I began my pirate career, it wasn't my intention in attacking Impel Down and Marieoa. And I only attacked you because you attacked me first. His tone held no malice, no spite whatsoever, but somehow, those words rooted everyone. Of course it wasn't, said Shikuyaku. Jiraiya and Tsunade told us the reason you attacked those places was because you were trying to save a friend of yours. Ayame, I think her name was. But more than just saving your friend, Rayleigh also said. You ended up freeing thousands of slaves at Marieoa as well as raiding their treasury, which means you most likely have several items of substantial value in your possession. Well, it wasn't like that at first, not when I arrived in Marieoa, Naruto began to articulate. But when I saw how miserable all those slaves were, how they were suffering and being treated as less than human, I just couldn't leave all of them like that. Then his expression darkened. And if I just so happened to make off with a few dozen legendary treasures and weapons, then what of it? I doubt that Tenryubito had any real use for them, other than collecting dust. I expected no less of you, Burning Will. Rayleigh laughed. Good job. Naruto blinked. I figure you must have arrived here sometime last night, Rayleigh carried on. Following the incident at the shipyard coating, there have been a large number of attacks on slave traffickers as well as slave owners themselves. All claimed that a mysterious hooded figure attacked them by using fire, while freeing the slaves. Obviously, you're the only pirate who can wield fire, so. Wait. Rayleigh, you know this guy? Usopp asked, confused. Well, not personally, Rayleigh replied. But Jiraiya and Tsunade told me what kind of person he is. His gaze slid back to the brooding blonde, who, thus far, remained all but inconspicuous, despite his infamous reputation. He's not all bad, I can assure you. Oi. So why are you really here? Usopp asked. Like I said, I want to join the Straw Hat Pirates, Naruto answered his question. Not those imposters running their mouths around town, the real thing. Unfortunately, not a one of you seems to know where your captain is, and I haven't had any luck in finding him. Why would you want join us? Nami asked him in suspicious tone. I thought you were hunting down Luffy. Naruto chuckled sheepishly. Actually, Well, I'm doing this to honor a friend of mine, Naruto told her. I want help Luffy in becoming the new king of the pirates. Your friend, repeated Usopp. 4 years ago, Naruto began to explain. I met him in my hometown. He was hunting for someone named Blackbeard, and rumors of his appearance must have brought him to where I lived. He stayed for only a few months, but in that time, we became very good friends. He was so impressed with me that he offered me to join his pirate crew. Well, why join us instead of this guy's crew? Tony Chopper asked hesitantly. Naruto's expression turned dour. He died. The sudden somberness in his eyes rippled across them all. I'm sorry, replied Tony Chopper in an apologetic manner. I didn't mean to. No, it's perfectly alright, Naruto said to Chopper. Besides, my reason for joining Straw Hat Pirates is to honor his memory. You said that your friend offered you a place in his pirate crew. Robin asked him. He did, Naruto answered. He was impressed with my fighting abilities when we fought and offered me a seat in his crew, the Whitebeard Pirates. The Whitebeard Pirates? Usopp repeated. Your friend was a member of the Whitebeard Pirates. Yes, Naruto confessed. His name was Fire Fist Ace, the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. Robin blinked, but said nothing. You knew Ace. Nami, Usopp, and Tony Chopper were very much suspired that Naruto had, at some point, prior to his pirate career, been friends with Luffy's brother Ace. So you want to join our crew just for Luffy's brother? Tony Chopper asked. Yes, I do, replied Naruto. But I felt like I should ask your captain first. Do you know where I can find your captain? He's not here, replied Nami with a devilish greed and smile on her face. Knowing Luffy, he'll probably be the last one coming. But if you want to join our crew, is going to cost you something, especially after what you. Wait a minute, Naruto protested. I thought you said you weren't going to charge me. I said I won't charge you for information, Nami pointed out. But since you attacked us, and singed my hair, I will charge you if you want to join our crew. With interest, of course. How much? Naruto asked. $5 million belly, Nami cheerily named her purse. $5 million belly, Naruto cried out loud. Come on, I already paid that much in getting here to this island. You don't have to worry about that, Naruto dear, said Shaki. Since you're a godchild of Jiraiya and Tsunade, I'll pay for it. Arrogate out, Shaki-san, Naruto said with growing appreciation. I'll pay you back, I promise. Excuse me. Naruto glanced downward, surprised to find Tony Chopper tugging at his sleeve. May I ask you a question? Sure. Why not? Said Naruto. Chopper half cringed, as if he expected the fearsome pirate to grow horns and a tail and start spewing fire, with the latter being well within the range of his abilities. When Naruto did no such thing, Chopper mustered up his courage to ask the question that, to a doctor like him, needed answering. I heard Silver's Rayleigh and Shikuyaku say the name of Tsunade, Tony Chopper alleged. Do you know Tsunade, the slug doctor? Yeah, I do, replied Naruto. She's my godmother. You're a fan of her? Oh, I am, Tony Chopper said happily. She's regarded as one of the greatest medical doctors in the world. I always wanted to meet her. Well, if we run into Granny Tsunade someday, I'll introduce you to her, Naruto promised. Thanks, Tony Chopper replied cheerfully. I'm going go out and look for Luffy, said Rayleigh. Naruto, why don't you come along? I'd like to have a little chat with you. You know where Luffy is? Nami asked. I didn't say I know where he is, Rayleigh answered back. But have a good idea where he might be. All right then, Nami said before turning to Naruto. If you manage to find Luffy, make sure you bring that idiot back to the Thousand Sunny since he has a bad habit in walking into situations. I will, Naruto replied before turning to Rayleigh. So I take it you really are Sliver Rayleigh, the right-hand man of the King of Pirates. Jiraiya and Tsunade tell me you're a hockey master, said Rayleigh. I take you also learned Haoshoku Haki. That I do, Naruto replied. Learning Busoshoku Haki took some focus and time. Kanbunshoku Haki was hard and painful to begin with. But Haoshoku Haki, man, that was a big surprise. Haoshoku Haki is an extraordinary form of Haki that cannot be attained through training. Rayleigh gives out the details. Only 1 in a million people carry it. It's no surprise that you possess that power. You probably inherited from your parents and I said, Rayleigh repeated, that you most likely inherited the conqueror Haki from your parents and myself. What do you mean? Naruto asked, confused on what sliver Rayleigh just said. Naruto, Rayleigh began slowly, I know this going to be shocking to you, but I'm your grandfather. Everyone, excluding Robin and Shaki, screamed. What did you just say? For an instant, Jewelry Bonnie was almost certain of it. She could have sworn that she heard it. His voice. It was the voice that whipped itself into a fury from outside her cell, all those years ago. The voice that had awakened something within her, the voice that had an irresistible, aching longing lodged within her breast, an almost physical need night and day for the sweet warmth of his presence once more. Even her own gluttony paled in comparison to this great and terrible need that swelled within her breast. Jewelry Bonnie tore off another copious streak of meat from the steak she'd been chewing on and gulped it down in one bite. When she reached for another, her fingers closed around a small length of chain instead. She frowned, regarding the object with ill intent a moment longer, before, her features abruptly softened. Fingering the clasp between her thumb and index finger, her perpetual hunger momentarily forgotten, she flicked the locket open, exposing the contents within. Bastard! She hissed, fighting the onslaught of tears, even as her eyes glistened anew. You stupid, good-for-nothing bastard! Enclosed within the large locket were 2 items. The first, a deceptively simple piece of paper, its bland, and otherwise harmless appearance belying its usefulness to her over the years. The second, was of a much greater value, so great in fact, that it could be called priceless. In the last 2 years, she'd often fiddled with the locket, gazing upon the face contained within, the face that had given her comfort on lonely nights. Just as it had ever since he'd freed her and her crew. Bitter though she was over their parting, the months that they'd shared were still a source of fondness for her. She hadn't been able to waylay him any longer than that, though she hadn't failed for lack of effort. Her crew had wanted to continue their journey, to set off for the new world with his power at their side. But they hadn't. With his strength, they would have been unstoppable. And there was time when Bonnie thought he might take her up on the offer. To serve as her first mate, to bend knee to none but her will, he certainly had no qualms to that between the sheets as her second in command. Then came the Marieoa incident. Naruto, who she'd been so certain had been on the verge of joining her crew, abruptly demanded that she take him to Marieoa on that fateful stormy night. She remembered the tortured look in his eyes when the name, Ayame, was mentioned, and the way that pain had morphed his already handsome face into something glorious, godlike in its intensity. Take me to Marieoa. She'd been a fool not to refuse him and a fool not to ask why. Instead, like a blasted wench, not a captain, she'd granted him his request, and they made full steam for the red line with all due haste. He didn't say a word to her for the entirety of the voyage. Whenever she'd felt the urge to press him for answers or anything for that matter, the same tortured expression reared before her visage, the same memory of that horror amongst horrors dawning upon him, and her resolve withered away. Upon their arrival to that mountainous wall of red stone, he'd done the unthinkable. She remembered everything that had been wrong about him that day. His touch, his taste, his lips, hungering over her, trailing delicately across her jaw. He'd pushed past her flailing hands and kissed her neck and then lower on her neck, and then he was pulling down the bra she'd gone to all the trouble of wearing that night, and then her hands weren't flailing anymore and his lips were gone. It was fun while it lasted, Bonnie. She remembered his words, spoken with crystal clear clarity. But this is goodbye. And just like that, he was gone. Back then, She'd only an instant to watch the flaming wings unfurl from his back, and then, with a great and mighty gust of pyrokinesis, he roared upward into the night. Reduced to little more the likes of a distant orange speck, and then that too, was lost in the clouds. He'd never returned, and since that day, she'd suffered as only a lovelorn woman could suffer. His face was the scourge of her dreams, because it was also a nightmare. A constant reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything, only to have it all thrown back in her face by another face, his face one exuding such warmth that it made her ache and, when I'd heard that you'd escaped from the world government, it made my blood freeze. Bonnie shook her head, clearing it of him, and of her terrible captivity at the hands of Akainu. She'd been bested so easily back then. Just the thought of it made her blood boil to a feverish pitch. She was no longer the weakling she'd been back then. She was no longer a rookie, either. The last 2 years had tempered Bonnie's resolve, forging it into an unstoppable blade of steel, one that she would take great pleasure in thrusting through the throat of the Navy Admiral. But for now, vengeance would have to wait. Because now, at long last, she tracked him back to Shabandi. The Vivre card was pointing that way, due west from here. Where here was, however, remained to be seen. She'd left her crew back at the docks, in the distant hope of keeping her identity a secret. Of course, a hooded woman with pink hair, a killer body, and a massive stake in hand wasn't exactly inconspicuous either. She could already feel the stares of passerby boring into her, whether from recognition, or, perhaps, confusion. It didn't take her all that long to realize why. As she quietly slipped past a gaggle of Marines cami, but there were a lot of them here, something caught her eye. It was little more than a simple poster, tacked up against a poster of similar size and length, but ultimately, that wasn't what caught her attention. She drew nearer to the bar and marveled at them, a series of scorch marks blackened across the doorstep of the bar, and, above that, relentless. She broke out a sweat and closed her eyes, trying to focus on the mad rhythm of her own heart. She bit down hard on the stake in her hand and forced herself to be calm, lest she be overcome by the sight before her. To her Charon, she still broke down laughing. Once her bounty had been a sizable $140 million. Now, much to her delight, it had been ratcheted up to an enormous $279 million. Even as she scrubbed at her eyes with the back of her free hand, the number did not change. Her bounty had all but doubled in the last 2 years. Doubled. Granted, she'd been out at sea for the majority of it, as she'd been searching for him, but still. Damn. Can I help you, miss? Bonnie blinked, drawn from her reverie by the sound of a voice. She turned, regarding the one who had spoken, with much ill intent. The man, for he was clearly male, was a homely-looking sort, and he quailed beneath the baleful glare leveled upon him. Good. He was right to fear her, even more so if he knew to whom he was speaking. She let him cower a moment longer, before thrusting a wanted poster into his face. You seen this guy? She demanded, parading the likeliness of burning wool before his visage. He spluttered nervously for a moment, before finally seeming to recognize that which peered out at him from within the poster. Dismay, disbelief, and desperation, each flitted across his face. For a moment, she was torn, wondering whether she should have given up this pointless quest long ago, and, fervently hoping that she'd finally found a lead. The bartender blinked owlishly. Yeah, I've seen him. He paused, his eyes flitting first toward her breasts, pervert blushing, then back to her face. He paid me for the damages he caused. Abruptly his eyes narrowed beadily, and became suspicious. Why? He asked suddenly. You a friend of his? Bonnie felt her cheeks darken at the mention of that. No, not friends. They'd been anything but friends. Friends didn't send your heart pounding. Friends didn't set you aflame with a single, smoldering smile. Friends didn't visit your cabin late at night and torment you with the vast intricacies of pleasure that the human body could offer. No, definitely not a friend. Have you seen him or not? Bonnie all but snarled, her free hand clenching into a claw around the massive stake upon which she'd been chewing, rending the bone asunder as easily as one might break a stick over their knee. Her eyes gleamed frightfully from within the hood, and for a moment, against a sudden and inexplicable gust of wind, her visage became visible. Quailing at the sight of her, and her strength, the bartender let out a frightful squeal. Yes, he cried. Yes, I've seen him. He was just here. He wrecked my bar, then paid me for the damages and everything. Please don't hurt me. Blubbering softly, he laid his head prostrate upon the ground and scraped the soil with his elbows, a furtive gesture of humility. Please, he begged. You can have the money he gave you, just please do not kill me. I have a wife and 3 kids. Paid you. That piqued Bonnie's interest. There was only one pirate who would do such a thing. Only one pirate was as well known for his vicious cruelty as he was his great sense of piousness and charity. Combined with the fact that the entirety of the bar looked as if it had been burnt from the inside out, and impossible. She held out her hand, palm up, she let the vivre card do its work. Imagine her surprise when it all but leapt from her hand. Barely had it done so than her fingers closed tight around it and formed a fist, preventing it from escaping. Warily now, she uncurled her fingers. The vivre card now hedged toward the north almost as if it were being pulled by a strong magnetic pull. It meant he was on the move. That no good baka. Just where the hell is he? Many groves to the north. For a moment, Naruto had the strangest sensation. It felt as though he were being watched, as though somehow, somewhere, someone was searching for him. How he knew, he could not describe. Then shock overwhelmed him and the moment was lost. Wait just a damn moment. Naruto cried out in shock. You're my grandfather. They'd disembarked from the ship, choosing instead to move to Shaki's ripoff bar. Naruto had been demanding answers on the way, but Rayleigh had remained imperviously silent, that is, until they'd arrived. Now, sitting at the bar, the occasional flame escaping his lips, Uzumaki D. Naruto wanted answers. And he wanted them now. His once calm demeanor was all but shattered, his mind still reeling from the revelation, thusly putting his search for Luffy on a temporary hold. Sharing in his surprise, Nami, Usopp, Tony Chopper, Frankie and Shaki still gawped. All eyes fell upon the Dark King, each demanding their own answer, each loosing in a simultaneous squawk of surprise that came in the form of a loud. What did you just say? That's right, Silver's Rayleigh confessed, ignoring their disbelief. As I said before, Naruto, I am your grandfather. He's your grandson, Shikuyaku slowly said, her eyes only slightly larger than usual. Then that means. Yes, Minato is my son, Silver's Rayleigh also admitted to Shikuyaku. I had a relationship with a woman living in Logatown before I set sail with Roger to conquer the entire Grand Line. After Roger's execution, I found out that I had a son named Minato. He paused at the last, as if to say, sorry I didn't tell you about that, honey, because this was not, absolutely not the kind of thing you concealed from the woman you were going to spend the rest of your life with. For the most part, Shaki concealed her shock rather well. The only sign of her anger was the slightest narrow ring of her eyes, and perhaps a tad of hesitation with which she exhaled the smoke of her cigarette. It was enough. One look, and Silver's Rayleigh knew he had some explaining to do. And fast. Thankfully, Naruto recovered his voice before Shaki's unholy wrath could descend en masse upon her unfortunate husband. Wait. Naruto held up his hands, as if he might somehow ward away the confusion. Did Ba-chan and Aro Sennin know about this? Because if they did, then why wasn't I told about this when they told me about my parents? Flames fizzled forth from clenched fists, a silent warning that his next answer would either be the right one, this it would be, or it would be his last. They did know, answered Rayleigh, albeit a bit hesitantly. But they both felt I should be the one to tell you if you ever made it here to Sabayati. Naruto must have accepted that answer, because his burning knuckle sputtered and died abruptly. But the words had not left him unscathed. There was a strange, deadened look in his eyes now, one that bespoke of joy, confusion, loss, and finally, furious relief. Robin saw this and touched her hand upon Naruto's shoulder. Just a touch. A simple brushing of the fingers, a brief caress traversing the valley between his shoulder and neck, then it was gone. This did not go unnoticed by the remaining Strafuts. Almost instantly, the anger leached from Naruto's face. His shoulders seemed to sag for a moment, as if to say he was angry, not stupid. Naruto remained hunched over the keep and swirled the contents of his glass, watching the alcohol ebb and flow with the cup before smashing it to his lips, and bringing it crashing down on the countertop. If not for the restraining hand on his shoulder, he looked as if he might lash out at that very moment. But he did not, and as such, the silence was all but deafening. Rayleigh, I can't believe you had this secret all along without me knowing it. Finally, it was Shaki who shattered the impasse. Sorry about that, but the fewer people the better, explained Rayleigh. Naruto's parents and I were extremely notorious pirates that had been hunted ruthlessly by the world government and the Marines. Abruptly, his expression soured, his gaze falling instead upon the whiskey in his glass. Just like Portuguese Ace was. You fear they will do the same way to Naruto as they did to Fire Fist Ace? Robin asked, doing her best to conceal the small flicker of dread that flitted across her face. Robin, many things though she was, had also been shaken by the death of Ace. But unlike the rest of the Strafuts, she held a more personal stake in the well-being of his successor, and the thought was an ache that awoke inside her that she has never known before, and for a moment, the intensity of it startled even her. He was already hunted relentlessly as it was. Yes, said Rayleigh. I never knew Roger had a child with Porges de Rouge, so it was a bit of a surprise that he never told me or the rest of his crew. His gaze slid to Naruto, as though his grandson might somehow compound his story with further facts. Which, of course, he did. Naruto was simply too proud to be passed over. Given the opportunity and the motive, he shone like the sun. And thus, he shined. Well, back then, I didn't know Ace was really the son of the Pirate King, Naruto resumed. But from what Granny Tsunade and Pervy Jiraiya told me, the world government had been killing a large number of pregnant women in order to ensure the bloodline of the Pirate King was terminated. His fingers drummed across the countertop as he said this, not from anger, but from an incessant desire to occupy the power thrumming within his fist. That they did, said Rayleigh. Minato and I were somehow able to keep our father-son relationship a secret to the world, save for Tsunade and Jiraiya. Yet despite the fact that we kept it a secret, Minato decided to follow my footsteps and become a pirate anyway. Minato. Would he happen to be Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze? Robin asked. That he is. Naruto's chest practically swelled with pride. Bachan and Arrow Sennin told me he was one of the most fearsome pirates to ever exist in the Grand Line. He was the eater of the teleportation fruit, a devil fruit that allowed him to travel vast distances in an instant, just by picturing the place in his mind. His explanation was greeted by somber expressions, as all of the Strafuts were eerily reminded of how they'd been sent flying by a man with similar powers, Bartholomew Kuma. And Minato's powers exceeded even those. Robin, however, chuckled softly at the mention of Naruto's father. I think I'm beginning to see a bit of a resemblance here. He was nicknamed the Yellow Flash, due to his powers and yellow hair, Rayleigh added. Unmatched in speed, cunning, and skill. Whether they be pirate or marine, anyone would rather retreat and face the gallows, rather than face him. For a moment, the faintest wisp of nostalgia flitted across his features. Because of his reputation, he was the one of the most infamous pirate ever alive, even invited to join the Shichibukai, though he declined the offer. If he hadn't, I might not be here. Naruto murmured, more for Robin's sake than his own. Then his gaze slid to Rayleigh. Oh, and by the way, thank you. Rayleigh laughed. I should be thanking you. You're taking this rather well, all things considered. And suddenly, Naruto felt relief. It welled up in him with such force that it almost staggered him, like it had been waiting there for so long biding its time, a relief he had nursed and hidden away but never acknowledged. It wasn't simply that he wasn't angry. He was furious, actually. All this time, he'd had a grandfather, and no one had bothered to tell him of it. But that fury found itself washed away in the aftermath of a joy so powerful that it threatened to utterly obliterate his senses entirely. It felt nice, knowing that he had a grandfather. Whatever you say, old man. It felt good to say it. It felt freeing. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, but he knew that he was in the right. He was willing to die being right. Not that he had any intention of dying anytime soon, mind you. Rayleigh peered at him over his spectacles, a broad smile alighting his every feature. He'd half expected his grandson to fly into a fit of rage, considering the secret that had been kept from him. When he extended a hand, Naruto was quick to clasp it. Even more so to be swung to his feet. Gone was the hesitation. Gone was the indecision. Gone was any semblance the likes of discomfort he had known thus. In its place was his usual overwhelming self-confidence, renewed by the fact that he. Turning to the rest of the Straw Hat Pirates, Rayleigh said, "The Flying Fish Riders are already on their way here with Brook. Sanji is looking for Zolo and has himself a snail you can contact. Naruto and I will be heading to Grove 46 since it's likely Luffy might be there." "Hold on one moment," Nami interrupted him before turning to Naruto. "If you really are going to join our crew, then how do we know you won't turn on us?" Naruto blinked as slowly as a tortoise, caught off guard by her heinous remark. "Nami." Robin began to protest. "Look, Robin," Nami cut her off. "This guy said in the bar that he has a score to settle with Luffy." Distinctly, she left out the murderous intent he'd leaked as he said those very words, because they still chilled her to the bone. She didn't want to believe that Luffy could be killed, but if it was someone like this guy, someone who wielded the powers of the Mera Mera no Mi at a whole different plateau. "Now wait a second," Naruto frowned. "You think I'm going to kill Luffy? Is that why you all attacked me?" "Based on your tone said Nami. "You seem to want Luffy for some grudge in the past. Why else would we attack you?" added Usopp. "I'm ready to fight you to the death before I let you harm Luffy." Chopper seconded. "You'll have to go through all of us first." Everyone's sweat dropped as they realized that, despite his vehement protest, he was still hiding behind the hulking cyborg. It was almost laughable, really. No, it was laughable. Hence the reason Naruto surprised everyone, then. He laughed. "You're all idiots. It's not what you think," said Robin. "I'm not surprised you've forgotten about him, Usopp." "Huh," Usopp replied with gasp as Naruto departed. "What you mean? I've never met this guy before. Are you telling me you've forgotten about Alabasta?" Robin asked Usopp with a smile. Usopp blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. "Huh." Naruto was still laughing. "I get it now. Really. I do." He managed to squeeze out the words between copious bots of innate laughter. "You guys thought I was going to kill him. Ha." He slapped his knee in genuine amusement. "That's a good one." He watched as realization dawned in their eyes save for Frankie, who seemed all the more confused and burst out, laughing so hard that he nearly cried, such was his amusement. "OWWWWH." Frankie bellowed angrily. "Somebody wanna tell me what's going on here, huh?" Robin whispered in his ear. Frankie performed a double take, then a sudden about-face. "Really? So that's what this is all about?" Robin nodded mysteriously. "Really?" Naruto nodded, scrubbing at his amused, moist eyes, with the back of his hand. "That bastard beat me in an eating contest. I'll tell you all about it." "Wait." Naruto turned, regarding the one who had spoken with a ruby-red iris. "Yes. Before you go anywhere, I have a question that needs answering." Nami stalked toward him, still shouldering her claim attacked. "That treasure you mentioned, just exactly how much was it worth, Anyhow, huh? About 100 no million dollars. Naruto shrugged, nonchalant. Why do you ask? Excluding Nami, everyone facefaulted, save Nico Robin, though even her eyes did widen slightly at the amount mentioned. Really? Nami pressed in, her eyes all but glittering with dollar signs. Say, what exactly did you do with all that treasure? Why, I gave it all away, of course. Naruto said this as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Is there a problem? Oh, no, that's great. What? Nami shrieked. What do you mean you gave it all away? All of it. You just tossed it out the window. Now, during a tantrum such of these, even the men of the Strafuts feared their navigator. Whenever money was mentioned, she became all but obsessed about it. And when she lost money, well, let us just say that the circumstances often turned out to be less than pleasant. Hence the rion that Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper, now cowered in a corner as said navigator through had what might have been her worst episode yet. Naruto didn't so much as flinch. There was no such tossing involved. He snapped right back, his forehead smashing against hers in retaliation towards the sudden intrusion of his personal space. I gave all of it to charities and such. What's wrong with that? I can't believe you. Nami shouted. What kind of idiot throws away that much cash and doesn't keep any of it for themselves? Oh, I know. You. Says the woman who'd give an arm and a leg for a few hundred berries. Naruto retorted flippantly. Says the idiot who gave all of his away. Nami's hiss was all but demonic. Lies. Wait, what? Nami blinked, caught unawares by the sudden accusation. Are you calling me a liar now, too? Indeed I am. Naruto barked, his forehead still mashed against hers, the two of them still engaged in their strange, tug-of-war shouting match. Honestly, how can someone so beautiful be so soullessly greedy and dense at the same time? It's maddening, I tell you. Maddening. It was then that Nami realized just how incredibly close she had gotten to him in her ire. Again with the compliments. Nami felt her cheeks darken as she backed away, unsure of how to respond to his sudden vehemence. I can't tell if he's being serious or wait, why am I blushing? Am I? I am. Gods. WW, what do you mean, exactly? Nami cursed herself for the stammer, but it was too late to take the words back. What makes you think I'm lying, huh? Why was it so incredibly hot all of a sudden? Her skin felt hypersensitive as Naruto retreated, his fingers briefly brushing across her shoulder, prickling across her back with goosebumps. Her thoughts went maddeningly awry, and it took every last ounce of her resolve to stay focused on the task at hand, because Naruto was speaking again. Well, I didn't give everything away. Naruto amended crossly. Several artifacts were too dangerous, so I held onto them for safekeeping. He reached over his shoulder, rummaging around in his pack for a moment, and, coming up with something, exhaled softly. Such as this. All the Strafuts save for Robin tensed, half expecting him to come out with a weapon of sorts. He did. Naruto had been poking around in his pack whilst he spoke, and now, Nami saw the reason why, as he revealed a large bundle. Unfurling it, exposing the contents within, he showed it to everyone and Nami marveled as he showed them what looked like a long, oblong box, one that he now opened. Nami gasped as she looked in the box to see an ebony black blade lying upon red silk. The blade sword seemed to have been carved from a single piece of glossy stone, looking almost as if it was made from glass. Was it obsidian? She'd heard of such materials but never actually seen them before. The hilt was beautiful, delicate ridges leading up to a pommel carved into a roaring dragon's head. As Naruto lifted it out gingerly, Nami saw what looked like red veins within the blade, tiny cracks along its surface as it came free from the sheath. She would have thought it was blood, but running her finger along the side told her it was perfectly smooth. Not a stain or blemish. When the smooth metal touched her skin she felt a tingle. Not unpleasant and almost warm. It made her like the weapon all the more. Now this was worth stealing. This was something special, Something that Naruto had deemed too valuable or perhaps too dangerous, prized enough to keep it on his person in the case that someone should seek it. Not that they would, of course, but how much could he expect anyone to be fool enough to steal from him, a man of fire? Wondering the likes of his subsequent explanation, however, Nami suddenly found her desire for the blade greatly lessened. This is Kokushibayo, Naruto explained solemnly. Its name translates to Black Death in your language. Believe me when I say that you don't want this blade to cut you. You might survive, you might not. Regardless, this blade's reputation is a fearsome one, and as such I couldn't trust it to be held by any hand other than my own. With an infinite delicateness, he slid the blackened blade back into its sheath and returned it into his pack. Remarkably, he made absolutely no mention of the thin wakizashi at his waist nor the other various baubles and trinkets within his backpack, the likes of which included a odd-looking belt, bracelet, an equally mysterious cloak, and other paraphernalia that one could only begin to hazard a guess at. If anyone had anything to say about these, however, they were keeping their silence. Naruto seemed to appreciate that. He shouldered his pack, squared his shoulders, and rolled his eyes in exasperation. I'll give all of you the whole story when I get back, he promised. Now, if you don't have any more questions, I believe I have an appointment with your captain. Before any of them, Nami, Robin, Rayleigh, or otherwise, could hope to stop him, he simply stalked forward, pushed through the double doors and was gone. A brief swish of superheated air signaled his departure, and then he was amongst the branches. Shaki sighed. He really is your grandson after all, Ray-san. Meanwhile, in Grove 46. Take him out, big boss. Looks like we've found one of the culprits already. Fake Luffy cackled as the hooded youth in the parka flanked by Fake Zolo and Fake Sanj approached him. Let's start by teaching this man a lesson. And just so you all know, what you're about to see happen to this man is the same thing that's going to happen to you if you ever have the nerve to defy me. So take that as a warning. Zoro, Sanji, do you know this guy? The fake mustachioed youth asked, recognizing the brash lout as the one who'd impeded him prior to his arrival. Thing is, I ran into him earlier. But before the charade could unravel further, a loud crack echoed throughout the air. That's as far as you go, pirate scum. A voice exploded across Grove 46. Strafut Luffy and all you minions. I suggest you come quietly. We have sealed all exits from Grove number 46 and there is nowhere left for any of you to run. Suddenly the grove was filled with the rasp of drawn blades, clacking of cannons, and shuffling of many feet. Each and every gaze turned toward the sound, only to find that the officer had indeed spoken the truth. They were completely surrounded. The Marines. Fake Luffy gasped, eyes bulging. The hooded mustachioed man's sweat dropped. How did the Marines know I was here? Sea Captain. Fake Sanji wailed. They've got us completely surrounded. Don't let 'em throw you, idiot. Why do you think we gathered all these new crew members for? We've got 100 million bounty heads on our side, for Chrisix. With this in mind, he whirled, his gullet swaying ridiculously to and fro as he leveled his gaze upon the most prominent member of his recruits, and quite possibly the most maidened of the bunch. Hey, Caribou, Fake Luffy shouted. Use that marine we captured as a shield. Force him to open a way out. Sorry, big boss. Caribou cackled mirthlessly. I'm afraid I can't do that. See, this snot-nosed brat lied to us. Told us he hadn't called his pals. Grinning from ear to ear, with malice and murder in his eyes, the supernova leveled his pistol upon the wounded marine, sprawled before his feet. Much to everyone's horror, his finger curled around trigger and barrel, his eyes widening marginally with uncontained glee. Clack. Right, Caribou, you idiot. Fake Luffy bellowed. Stop. Too late. With a sickening squelch, the marine toppled over, dead, a bullet in his head. The result was instantaneous. Shoot the pirates down. Before either force could collide, a blazing current of flame enveloped the clearing. Evolving from orange to yellow then red, It boiled through across the void, separating them from each other and one another. It was a veritable pillar of the inferno, spitting and snarling and snapping at all those nearby, for it would suffer no trespass. Any who dared to brook such an offense were subsequently reduced to ashes. Snapping and crackling, those ashes smoldered away in the wake of his arrival. Well now, what do we have here? Slowly, they resumed human form. Slowly, ever so slowly, they assumed the shape of sapphire eyes, roughened blonde bangs, and a whiskered visage, one as easily recognized as it was unlike any other. Before, he had been relatively unknown. Now, with no cowl with which to hide behind, he appeared in a great, glorious gust of smoke and flame, perching upon the nearby bough of one of the many mangrove of Shabandi archipelago. He smiled softly, his great gaze scouring the clearing clean, bringing a halt to the fighting before it could even hope to begin. The silence was deafening. Draped like a shroud, it hung over the grove, thick and palpable. No one moved. No one breathed. All eyes fixated upon him, this burning man who wielded 4 blades, this Oni of fire and ash, this smoldering specter that loomed over them like God himself, ready to dole out divine judgment upon the wicked. BB burning will. Fake Luffy gawped openly, sweating now, like the pig he was. Why you mean he actually came here? Naruto cleared his throat, and every pirate, every marine, flinched. Gentlemen, Naruto began slowly, very slowly. I be placed in a bewilderment. His gaze swept across the deck, scouring for any sign of the instigator that had so roused his wrath. Locking upon one Demolo Black. Here I came here, looking for Monkey D. Luffy. He thrust a hand imperiously towards the cabin, towards the fake Luffy. And upon a sudden, I find this, a crew of impostors. Sailors abandoning their posts, without orders, without leave. Men before the mast, and taking the ship for themselves. What be that, I wonder? He mused aloud, refusing to smile at his crudely crafted metaphor. He let the silence hang, until everyone choked on it. Mutiny. Someone shouted suddenly. Naruto didn't skip a beat. He didn't care that he couldn't see them. He knew the voice by sound alone. It was Termari. She was here somewhere, hiding amongst them, tucked safely out of sight, he knew that much. For a moment, he almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Such a persistent wench. Oh, well, best to make full effect of the chaos she had sown amongst their ranks. Again, Naruto held a hand to his ear, feigning deafness. Mutiny, came the reply, sounding only slightly exasperated. Naruto nodded, his form bending, shimmering, beneath wave upon wave of oppressive heat. Mutiny. And what fate befalls mutineers? He paused, his gaze sweeping through their ranks of pirates and marines like a great, cleansing flame. Now we all know the answer to that, do we not? Flames boiled outward from his fists, eddying forth from his knuckles, swelling with every second. Mutineers. Hang. Flames spewed forth from his fists, circumventing the clearing in a ring of fire. Now, both the pirates and marines were trapped with one another. A lucky few had thought too much of the great, burning will, reputation, and looked as though they might choose to fling themselves at their would-be captors, rather than face this man of flame and fire and fury. And so, the battle would be joined. Naturally, the marines would want to eliminate the pirates rather than capture them. And of course, the pirates wouldn't want to go down without a fight, either. Neither could come to a compromise, as their values were simply too different, the black to the marines' white. Eventually, they would clash. Here, with no hope of escape, save through the flames, their choice was to fight, or to die. At least, that had been the intention. A blood-curdling shriek shattered the silence, demanding everyone's attention. Naruto rounded on the sound, flame sputtering, eyes narrowing, becoming furious specks of crimson as he beheld he who dared to interrupt him. Surprisingly, he recognized him. Naruto knew who this pirate is. He was Wet-Haired Caribou, a supernova pirate worth $210 million Barry. Based on the rumors he heard about him, this guy has a violent reputation for killing countless Marines, a true psychopath. He also recognized the large, rotund, egg-shaped man at his side, his brother, blood splatterer, Kuribo. Wicked and violent, they were both born killers, and now one of those killers had singled him out and turned their wrath upon him. Lovely. Yo! Caribou shrieked. You're finally here. Naruto gawped, aghast as the man stalked forward, the mass of pirates and marines parting before him like the Red Sea. What in the? I've been waiting a long time for this. Caribou snarled at Naruto. A long fucking time for this, to kill you. Every time first killed a marine or anyone that crosses me, I think of you, ya bastard. Now you're going to die, slowly and painfully, for what you did to me. He pranced around, stamped his feet and flailed his long sleeves at an equally incredulous Burning Will, the latter beginning to wonder if the former had finally lost his mind. Say what? Naruto asked, confused by what this pirate had just said, to which his flames slowly dimmed. He'd never seen this man before. He knew him by reputation only, a reputation that nearly rivaled his own in terms of blood. That was where the similarities ended. Whereas Naruto spilled blood for the sake of the righteous, Caribou simply killed anyone and everyone for the thrill of it, because he was just that, a man who reveled in bloodshed. Don't act like you don't know me, Burning Will. Caribou snapped. And don't act as if you don't remember what you've done to me. I'm sorry, Naruto repeated in a more confusingly irate manner. I've never seen you before in my life. Now, if you know what's good for you, you'll leave me alone, Caribou. What? I said, beat it, small fry. Naruto all but snapped. I'm not in the best of moods right now. Attack me and you'll receive no mercy. You mean you really don't remember me? Caribou hissed. You've forgotten what you did to me. Look, for the last time, I've never seen you before. Naruto's confusion had only succeeded in pissing off Caribou even further. Bastard! He screamed in a rage as he flung himself at Naruto with bloodlust in his eyes. Heedless of the danger, heedless of his own peril, heedless of anything but the terrible red haze that clouded about his vision. He'd kill him. He'd make him pay. Him. All of them. All of those who'd ever make him look like such a fool, all those who'd betrayed him, all of. He never made it. A blast of black fire struck Caribou in the chest. He screamed, a peal of terror that turned into torment as he fell back onto the floor. Everyone turned and realized that it none other than Burning Will had done the deed, his gloved hand still held out before him, and wreathed in black flames. Caribou clutched at pool of shadow that spread across his torso, his eyes growing wide and large as the rippling flame began to spread. What the hell? Naruto shook his head, smoothing his roughened bangs with one hand. I warned you, didn't I? He sighed. Now, you'll pay the price. He gestured with his flame-sheathed hand, and the flames encroaching Caribou responded voraciously. It grew, and appeared to be eating him. No. Caribou wailed, realization dawning in his eyes, the understanding of his fate, finally at hand. No. Pirates, marines, and bystanders alike watched in dull horror as his screams turned into shrieks. He spasmed wildly, dropping his pistol and struggling as the flames enveloped him with a terrible, terrifying slowness. It washed over his arms and his legs, and then finally swallowed his head. His screaming ended abruptly. The shadow-covered body, for it this massing of flames could no longer be called a person, flailed about twice more, and then the blackness simply collapsed, leaving nothing more than a seeped pool of liquid on the floor. The greenish liquid slowly slithered across the grass, hissing and sizzling wherever the sunlight touched it. Naruto watched the strange, swampy ooze for a moment longer before he blinked, subsequently extinguishing the slow-burning flames. Then he turned his gaze upon the rest, marine and pirate alike, and he scowled. He wasn't quite sure if Caribou was a Logia. Most men turned to ash beneath the flames of the Amaterasu, but whatever he was, the reputation he'd earned over the years did him little good as a pile of seeping muck. He'd deal with him later. Now, Naruto began slowly, calling out to those below him. Have any of you seen Straw Hat Luffy? All fingers pointed toward the fat buffoon standing upon the deck. Naruto's left eye twitched. That isn't him, you dolts. That's a fake. Fake Luffy, and all of the imposters quailed as thousands upon thousands of angry eyes turned upon them. The word of burning will was not to be questioned, apparently. Now they realized this too late, much too late. Naruto permitted himself a brief moment of satisfaction as they prepared to meet the fate they so deserved. Then he cast it aside as he would so much refuse, because the angry clamor had become all but deafening. Like I said, where's the real? A faint prickling in the back of his neck was the only warning Naruto received. Veen. Then the branch, the bough upon which he'd been so firmly perched, exploded. He had only an instant to react, only a split second to see the particle beam of light as it rushed forth from an unknown location, then he was gone. Bits of bark peppered across his coat as he fell, plummeting toward the earth, feet first. Naruto was unconcerned. His mind was already awhirl, leaving his body to absorb whatever impact might befall him. There was only one man capable of such an attack. Shit, he swore as the ground rushed up to greet him. They sent Kizaru here already. He barely even registered the fray as he landed, scanning the crowd for any sign of the admiral. Instead, the forms of not one, not two, but three hulking Bartholomew Kumas reared up before him, each completely identical, each moving toward him, and each ravaging the horde of pirates as though they were not but children in their effort to try and apprehend him. Oh, it's the pacifistas, someone screamed, just before he was crushed underfoot by one of the hulking behemoths. Another pirate hazarded a slash at the approaching titans, only to be caught up in an explosion as the giant opened its maw and spat a golden stream of light in his direction. Naruto watched the man die and blanched. So this, then, was a pacifista. He'd read about them, he'd heard the rumors, but still, to see one up close. They really did look just like Kuma. It was unnerving. Even more so, that they were wielding the powers of Kizaru's Pika Pika no Mi. What are the Marines' elite human weapons from the war doing in a place like this? Another pirate cried, weeping as he flopped into the dirt, utterly unable to take on such a terrible abomination such as these. Most of the pirates seemed to be suffering a similar fate, even as they realized that they'd been deceived. Naruto didn't so much as spare an errant thought for them and their fate. Fools would always die fools, so it seemed. Instead, he stood his ground, watching as the invincible human weapons of the world government came hurtling toward him. He spied Sentomaru within the chaos of Marine versus Pirate and smiled softly to himself, but made no move to confront him. So that was all they were going to send, then. A couple of antique pacifista and Sentomaru. In the time that it took for him to blink, fake Luffy had already been viciously clubbed across the head by the axe-wielding Marine, while the remaining imposters quite literally quit the field. Let them take their chances with the flames, he mused to himself. Their fate is none of my concern. His relief, however, turned out to be temporary. Pirates, Burning Will, Uzumaki Naruto and, Strafut, Luffy identified. One of the pacifista announced, its calm, monotone of a voice ringing out over the clearing. Seconds after the fact, Naruto realized that, during his musings, most of the pirates had been captured, and, he was standing conspicuously out in the open. He was dimly aware of that he'd been detected, but somehow, he couldn't quite focus on the task at hand. Instead, the words, Strafut Luffy, rang through his head like a clarion call, filling him with an elation that he hadn't felt since 2 years ago. Take them out, PX5. Sentomaru ordered. You too, PX2. Unbidden, lightning raced down Naruto's spine. Luffy. He's here. Where? He half turned, hoping to find him over his shoulder. Instead, he became deathly aware of the resounding explosion that deafened him, throwing a hail of timber and soil at his back as the deck behind him detonated. He watched, watched as a obscenely large pack filled to the brim with various foodstuffs, spun past, and landed not a yard away from him. Whoa! A terribly familiar voice shouted. Man, was that close? And what was that for? All my precious food is in this bag, you know. All of the pirates and marines cried out as one, and pointing and shouting and screaming, gibbering like they were frightened schoolgirls. They couldn't believe their eyes. He wasn't dead. Monkey D. Luffy, the son of Dragon, was here, alive, in Shibandi. It's the face from the wanted poster. Naruto was stunned. Luffy. Save for the X-shaped scar on his chest and some new attire, he hadn't changed at all. He frowned indignantly at the pacifistas who had nearly incinerated him, but otherwise, he remained unharmed. It was impossible not to recognize him. The strafut, the stitched scar beneath his eye, heck, even his voice was nearly the same. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Don't tell me you're gonna get in my way again. He called down to Sentomaru. I don't have the time to deal with you right now. Naruto watched the two of them bicker for a moment longer, before he finally realized that this was not a dream, and this was, in fact, the genuine article. The pirate he had searched high and low across the sea nearly for 2 years now. And so he laughed. Luffy. Naruto laughed aloud, unable to say anything else, such was his enthusiasm. It's you. It really is you. Nanda. Luffy blinked, suddenly very much aware of the blonde standing beside him. Who are you? He squinted at the blonde whose body roiled and broiled like so much flame, and he found his words taken away as he recognized the color of those flames, because this was the very same power his brother had wielded, prior to death. Wait a minute. It couldn't be. No way. Naruto grinned wickedly. After all these years, I've finally found you, Monkey D. Luffy. Now, let me join your crew. Luffy blinked, unsure of exactly who this man was, unsure of why he was on fire, and not screaming in pain, or burning, for that matter. Weird. But he looked strong. And if a strong guy wanted to join his crew, the crew of the future Pirate King. Sure. Luffy enthused. But why are you on fire? Naruto couldn't help himself. He started laughing again. Ha. Just like that. Huh. You haven't changed a bit, Luffy. His laughter was cut short as a beam of light whisked itself past Luffy, who nonchalantly turned his head and let it slip aside. He even had the time to murmur something that Naruto didn't quite hear as the beam passed them by and tore through the mangroves. And suddenly, Luffy's arm was turning a strange, rubberized pink and smoking. Naruto was about to remark on it when a shadow fell over him. Quote exclamation mark quote. He barely even registered the second pacifista until it was right on top of him. And by then, it was already too late. For the pacifista, that is. Scarce had it neared Uzumaki D. Naruto, then a wall of blue and gold flames entirely unlike the black flames of the Amaterasu, sprang up between them. The pacifista did not slow. Not until a giant flaming hand clamped around its midsection and wrapped around it, encircling the machine's hulking waist as though it were not but a twig. You're interrupting our reunion, Naruto murmured darkly, eyes flashing, glimmering with red moistness. Out of my way, trash. It was an eerie appendage, this hand made of both bone and flame, and cyan of azure saffron curling about the pacifista, holding it fast, hoisting it up, up, until its feet left the soil, until it was left scrabbling for purchase in the air. Finding none, it opened its mouth and flailed with both its hands, trying terribly to free itself from this vice, but to no avail, for the vice was inescapable. Then, before the eyes of Sentomaru, the unthinkable occurred. A bony thumb pressed down upon the top of its head, forcing its mouth closed before the pacifista could find a target, before it could fire. The result was catastrophic. Unable to fire the compressed beam of light, the suppressed energy had nowhere left to go but up. With a deafening whump it imploded, the energy frying its photoreceptors, and scrambling its circuits so hopelessly beyond repair that it had no chance of survival. And then the mighty fingers of the flaming hand closed. They simply curled into a fist, and the pacifista was crushed between them, reduced to little more than a mangled heap of scrap that was promptly cast aside like a broken toy, left to die in the dirt and be forgotten. It did not rise again. And there was more than one pacifista carcass laying upon the ground as well. In the time that it had taken Naruto to dispense with one pacifista, Luffy had also taken down PX2 as well, the massive machine having knifed into the dirt, and it too lay deathly still. The pirates gawped. We couldn't even scratch one of those things, and they took out two like it was nothing. Luffy remained as he was, but it was Naruto's surroundings that had changed. Materializing outward from the ghoulish appendage that had crushed the pacifista, a grisly creature of shadow and flame and was born. Little more than a human skeleton, the creature loomed over its master, its ghastly appearance belying the awesome power it wielded and that of its creator, who stood enshrouded within its ribcage. Gleaming with ill intent, the creature raised its right hand, and within its fingers appeared a blade of blazing luminescence. So, you've come here to join the Strafut crew, have you, Burning Will? Sentomaru accused, heedless of the smoldering sword that loomed over their heads. I'm going to arrest you either way, but I'd like to know. Something like that, Naruto replied as Luffy turned and waved to someone approaching. I don't suppose you'll let me pass now, will you? Sentomaru's brow furrowed, eyes flickering with exasperation and annoyance. He'd struck a nerve. Sentomaru still held a grudge against him for the way in which he'd beaten Kizaru within an inch of his life. In the time that it took for him to attack, it would all be over, and he knew this. Still, Naruto wasn't expecting his reply. Like hell I will. Sentomaru all but snarled. I'm going to bring you to justice, here and now, for what you've done. Didn't think so. Naruto muttered. Well, I don't have time to play with you or whatever Admiral Headquarters has sent after me. Before Sentomaru could broach the subject further, the grim reaper of a creature brought its blade crashing down into the ranks of the Marines, scattering them and kicking up copious amounts of dust. When it cleared, a number of Marines were either dead, or wounded, and Naruto was nowhere to be seen. He did, however, have a clear view of the last remaining pacifista going down in a heap of smoldering circuits as none other than Zolo and Sanji ran it through. Apparent, Luffy had been waving to them, while he was distracted. Now as he watched it fall, watched his men gawp, watched them declare that the real Strafut crew was indeed alive, and well, his fury knew no bounds. Wait, come back here. Oddly enough, Luffy paused. Hey, what's wrong? Sanji demanded. What are you stopping for? Rayleigh. Luffy was staring at a nearby tree, a tree in which a very familiar old man was currently sitting. Standing beside him was none other than Burning Will himself, though how he had crossed the distance between them in such short fashion remained to be seen. It did not, however, keep the future king of the pirates from calling out to him. No sir, it did not in the least. The Dark King. The captured pirates squealed in fear. He's here, too. You've done well. Rayleigh shouted to Luffy. It seems like you've honed your skills even further. Luffy nodded enthusiastically. I also thought I'd come to see you off. Rayleigh said to Naruto, giving the boy an encouraging nudge. But it doesn't look like my grandson needs my help, after all. For the longest time, there was silence. Utter silence, as Silver's Rayleigh willingly exposed the one secret that he had kept hidden for most of his life, to the world. Naruto burned with the shame of it all. He wouldn't have the nerve to do such a thing, not if it were his grandson. He flushed. Shut up, old man. He's the grandson of the Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh. Marines and pirates alike gawped at the revelation. The grandson of Rayleigh and the son of Dragon working together surely meant the end of them all. Even Zolo and Sanji were slightly nonplussed to hear this. So this was him, Burning Will, then. Well, he was certainly every bit as imposing as the papers had made him out to be. Rayleigh. Luffy shouted once more. I'm gonna do it. Quote? I'm gonna become the Pirate King. Naruto couldn't help but smile at the unshed terror in his grandfather's eye. Then he slapped Luffy on the back. Not hard enough to harm him, mind you. The boy was a rubber man after all, just enough to urge him forward and away from the remaining Marines that dared to harry their footsteps. Head straight for the top. Rayleigh shouted at their backs. Both of you. Sure thing, Gramps. He kept running. Even as his grandfather turned to face the Marines. Even as his sword cleared his scabbard. Even when the sound of their pursuers grew distant. Even when it vanished altogether, he kept running, careful to keep his pace, careful to keep pace with Luffy. He wasn't going to lose sight of him now, not after all the trouble he'd gone through to find him in the first place. Rayleigh watched them go, and smiled softly. My apprentice and grandson are setting sail. He began slowly, turning to face the many Marines who stood on the opposite end of the line he'd just drawn in the dirt. By all means, do as you please, but I would suggest. His glasses gleamed, ever so slightly. That you do not cross this line. Crap, they're one step ahead of us. Zolo hissed as they rounded a bend, only to find even more Marines barring their path. Rather, they were, until dozens upon dozens of ghosts swept down upon the soldiers and phased right through each and every one of them. As one, they dropped to their hands and knees, moaning and depressed, and all too full of demotivation. Naruto nearly froze on the spot at the sight of it. Gee ghosts. I just knew this mayhem had something to do with you people. Hovering only a few feet from the now utterly useless Marines, was a woman with incredibly bright and curly pink hair. Not to mention a positively ghoulish outfit that would put any goth to utter shame. Are you still hanging around here? She asked. Apparently, she was the one who controlled the spirits, and as such Naruto stopped well short of her position, leaving Zolo to nearly run face-first into the strange goth Lolita. That Sanji was fawning over her was even more disturbing. Well, what are you still handing around here? He demanded of the strange girl. It's not like I asked you to stick around. Is that any way to talk back to the person who brought you all the way here? She snapped right back. Why, if it weren't for me you'd be. Then she noticed Naruto. Oh, and who is this? She asked, drifting closer to Naruto. You look familiar. Kind of cute, even. Have I seen you somewhere before? Naruto wasn't listening to any of it. All he saw was the strange spirits listing about at her side, drawing ever nearer to him. Ghosts. Why, oh why, did it have to be ghosts? Their sickly sweet smiling and giggling did precious little to assuage his intense superstitions, and they were just so creepy. And not really. He averted his gaze as she approached. I don't think we've ever met. No, she insisted, I've definitely seen your face before. Gay. Naruto made a squelching sound as she drifted even closer to him, floating impossibly just above the ground, as if she weighed little or next to nothing. His usual self-confidence abandoned him in the wake of what he'd seen, and in the presence of this foul, ghost-wielding woman. Well, he told himself, at least she was cute. Wait, what if she was a cute ghost? Gah, he couldn't stand it. Ah, Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin, so close was she when next she spoke. I thought I recognized you. You're Burning Wool, aren't you? Why yes. He refused to look in her eye. Gods, why couldn't this ghostly woman just leave him be? And I'm afraid I have somewhere to be. Too bad. She sighed, her lips dangerously close. My name's Perona, by the way, cutie. Something deathly called pressed against his cheek, then passed right through it. To his disbelief and dismay, so did she. There was no substance, no solidarity, nothing at all. She simply phased through him, and emerged behind him. Naruto turned white as a sheet and shuddered all over, lurching back and forth on his heels. He'd just been kissed by a ghost. I think I'm going to be sick. Sanji was gawping at him, eyes full of flame. Luffy looked completely unperturbed. Zolo was blushing. Worst of all, Perona was smiling. Nothing, however, could have prepared Naruto for what happened next. He felt a faint surge of killer intent, Then the hairs on the back of his neck prickled in warning. Unfortunately, Naruto was still in the process of trying to turn when he saw a face he hadn't seen in a very, very long time. "You dirty rotten scoundrel." Something very hard and very, very solid cracked across his face and sent him sprawling. He recognized the voice, somehow, despite the black spots speckling across his eyes and blurring his vision. Odd. He couldn't remember the last time someone had struck him. Certainly not since he'd eaten the Mara Mara no Mi. He tasted blood in his mouth as he rolled over and onto his back, the world still swimming in and out of focus. "Wah! You fucking bastard!" Bright pink hair flashed before his vision, then strong hands seized the lapels of his jacket and practically dragged him to his feet. She slapped him. Not gently. Stars, no, whole planets exploded before his vision, before he realized that both blows had been infused with hockey. Both blows were solid, too. Painfully so. Not Perona then, certainly not. She'd have just phased right through him, and she'd no reason to strike him, for that matter. "You no good fucking bastard." That shook him right out of his daze. It took some time, but eventually, the words swam into focus for him. Immediately, he wished it hadn't. He recognized her. How could he not? Hers was a face that he could have forgotten, if he had the heart to forget. He did not. Nor did he have the strength to avert his gaze once focused, because now he could see. Belatedly, he realized that she was crying as she struck him, each blow growing weaker and lacking of focus until they passed through him altogether. "Ah, Bonnie." He half laughed, half groaned, around a mouthful of bloody lips. "Long time no see. You won't be able to see at all when I'm through with you." She snarled at him, but her words lacked their usual venom. At length, she released him. Naruto wobbled for a moment, then regained his balance, his features already resetting into their usual shape as the flames boiled away what damage had been done to them. He stood woodenly, not taking enough care as he did so. "So, how did you find me, Bonnie?" he asked at last, brushing himself off. "I didn't expect to see you here. You gave me your Vivre card, dumbass." "Oh, yeah." Naruto scratched the back of his head in contrition. "Forgot about that." "Did you forget about your promise, too?" she accused, sparks snarling through her eyes as she stepped closer. Then, more softly, "Did you forget about me?" Abruptly anger died, replaced by something akin to hope, albeit a forlorn one. Ouch. Shock lanced through Naruto. He hadn't forgotten about their promise, thought she might have expected him to, after he'd fled. "I haven't forgotten," he argued weakly. "It's just that, I made him Ace a promise, too." With that, Naruto started to silently move away. She quickly turned and reached out with her hand, grabbing his forearm. He froze. Taking his hand, she brought to her face, cradling her cheek. All at once he surged forward, seizing Bonnie in his arms and kissing her with a ferocity that nearly overwhelmed her. "I've been a fool. She shouldn't feel this way." Jewelry. Bonnie had never cared for such trivialities and she cursed herself for them now. Love was a weakness. Love was an anchor. A chain. It held you down and tied you a noose around your neck, one that slowly constricted over time. Love was a weakness. Love was a cancer that grew inside and made one do foolish things. Love is death. The love most dreamed of was something that would be more important to one than anything, even life. It would kill her to love him. Perhaps not now, but, eventually. Bonnie knew this, and yet, she pressed her lips against his for a second time, throwing her arms round his neck and securing herself fast against him. She felt him stiffen at this uncharacteristic display of inhuman weakness, then she felt him relax, both into her lips and into her, as he swept his arms around her, leaned into her lips, and drew her closer into a strange foe of an embrace. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. And it wasn't enough. It took everything in her not to bolt, and ultimately, it still wasn't enough. In the end, the sound of cannon fire jolted them from one another. At any rate, You need to set sail as soon as possible. Perona insisted. There are battleships appearing just offshore. Shock rippled across the five of them and between the two of them, especially Naruto. He'd been so caught up in her that he'd nearly forgotten everything else. Just like last time, he shuddered, nodded, and forced his fingers from her hair, her face, and finally, himself from her. She shook her head mutely, knowingly, and Naruto felt his heart break 1,000 times over as he watched the despair well up in her eyes anew. Blast. He'd thought himself prepared for this. He'd been wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. Naruto turned to face Jewelry Bonnie. I have to go. Idiot. She mumbled, refusing to look him in the eye. Why didn't you tell me you were leaving that time? Naruto shrugged, lamely. I suck at goodbyes, Bonnie. Then don't say it this time. She whispered softly. I said don't say goodbye, this time. Naruto grunted as she stomped on his foot and ground her heel in. Yep. Same ol' Bonnie. Tsunere or not, she still knew how to kick his ass when he got out of line. Still, he winced as she withdrew, the action striking painfully at the cord of his soul. Her lips touched his for a final time, touching, lingering, then falling away, with the rest of her. She took 2 steps away from him, and he saw how much effort that took from her. I'll see you in the new world. He promised, hoping he sounded more convicted than he felt. Because suddenly, he wasn't feeling all that convicted at all at the moment. With the former love of his life, things had always been complicated. It had always been that way. You bet your ass you will. Bonnie's reply was softer than he'd expected, not quite sad, nor could it be called happy. He couldn't be sure of what to make of it. And before had the chance to dissect it further, she spun about on one heel, and walked away. Watching her walk watching a woman he'd loved walk out of his life, it took every fiber of his being to stand fast, to stand still and not break in two. Suddenly, it occurred to Naruto that he might not see her again. And so, he watched. He watched her go, watched the swaying of her hips, watched everything and anything about her. He stayed that way, just watching, waiting and watching until she'd rounded a corner and paused. She turned, her gaze locking with his, even across the distance that separated him. She touched a hand to her necklace, raising it as far as that chain would allow, and then she let it drop to her chest, instead of breaking it, as he'd feared she would. It was a gesture of acceptance, of forgiveness, and of relinquishment. Take care of yourself, she called from across the corner, then she rounded it, and was taken from his sight. Naruto found himself staring, although she was gone. Even then, it took a harsh word from Sanji to draw him from his reverie. He blinked, and found that his eyes were suddenly moist. Why was that? Did he truly miss her already? It wasn't too late. If he wanted, he could chase after her, maybe even catch up. So why wasn't he moving? Because he was needed elsewhere. He'd made a promise to Ace, and, though it pained him to do so, he just couldn't bring himself to break it. That promise had been the very definition of who he was for the last 2 years. He had molded his very life around it, conformed to it, made sacrifices for it, and, given the chance, he would likely make many, many more in the future. Oi, you alright? Zolo asked, his voice tinged with concern. Naruto didn't know the swordsman all that well, but he felt that the man's intent was genuine. With that knowledge, the apoplectic rage brewing behind his eyes dimmed, leaving him only with a dull ache just above his chest. For a moment, it looked as though he might rebel. His lips pursed into a thin line however, and even Luffy could have seen that it was only with great reluctance that Burning Will discarded his thoughts of desertion. At length, he exhaled, heavily. I will be. Naruto sighed and scrubbed at his eyes with the back of his hand, his expression still somewhat on the dour side. Eventually. Can we get going now? I find myself with a sudden desire to be far, far away from this place. Zolo inclined his head a fraction of an inch. I think we can manage that. Perona bid them farewell shortly thereafter. Thankfully, she didn't try to kiss him again. Naruto didn't know if he could handle it, teasing or not. A small part of him yearned for comfort and solace. He was torn. He would likely remain that way for quite some time. As they hurried through the streets, however, it was ultimately Sanji who'd taken it upon himself to harass his fellow blonde. Naruto had been expecting this. In fact, he welcomed it. Anything to turn his mind from her, from the life he'd just left behind, a life of contention and peace. Best not to think of it, he mused. Better to distract himself. Just who the hell do you think you are, huh? Sanji was asking, when, abruptly, Naruto rounded on him. Naruto rounded on him, moving with a speed that Sanji had not thought possible. One moment he'd been yards away, watching his former lover walk out of his life. The next, smoldering swirls of sapphire and scarlet swelled before his vision, blotting out all else. Belatedly, Sanji realized that Naruto wasn't angry. He was furious. Furious was risking the term actually. Perhaps enraged fit the bill. Perhaps it did, as Sanji began to realize that he'd broached the one subject that could easily draw the ire of Burning Will. And in his foolishness, Sanji had drawn ire in spades. Are we talking about my love life or yours? Naruto countered, his tone curt, his expression pitch black. Because, if I were you, I'd hold my tongue. That is, unless you'd like to lose it, friend. He practically spat the word, a wisp of ash leaking through his lips as he spoke. Zolo and Luffy had both slowed, peering back towards the unfolding scene, wondering what had caused the sudden delay. Naruto paid them no heed. Instead, he was suddenly consumed by the desire to cook, the cook, as it were. You've got some nerve, breaking her heart like that. Sanji snapped back, bending his leg at the knee, lifting it in threat of retaliation. I would never. Oh, shove it. Naruto shoved past him, nearly knocking his fellow blonde off balance as he pressed onward. At that very moment, something miraculous occurred. Zoro had an epiphany. Why was Burning Will traveling with them in the first place, he wondered. Why did he seem to be on such good terms with Luffy, he wondered. Why hadn't he thought of this just now? Oi, he began slowly, as Naruto caught up to them. Why are you following us, anyway? Why? I'm part of the crew, of course. Naruto replied, matter-of-factly. Why else would I still be here? What? Sanji shouted. And who decided this, huh? It's fine by me. Luffy laughed. Zolo sighed. Not again. Looks like we'll have to save the introductions for later. Naruto remarked as the sound of cannon fire reached their ears. For now, I'd think we'd better get back to the ship, wouldn't you agree? It was then that the massive shadow of a gigantic flying bird fell across them. From there, the rest was little more than a gigantic smear on burning Mori. Currently, BAKRAM. The sound of cannon fire could be heard all around. It brought Naruto back from his memories, gently but insistently tugging him back to the present, to the here and now. He blinked, clearing the soot and smoke from his eyes, just in time to avoid being doused by another spray of seawater. Blasted Marines. They were still harassing them even as they tried to make their escape from the grove. Should we fire back? Usopp was asking Brook. Maybe we should try to outmaneuver them. Oh, but that tore it. No, Naruto stated. He climbed down the rigging toward them, clutching his staff in his hand firmly. He had a dangerous look that made Nami nervous. We are getting out of here. Now. He was all but seeing red. The tension had built and built and built within him, and now it demanded release. And a release was just what he planned to give the Marines. Oh, a release indeed. Nami stared at him, mouth agape. You don't mean. Naruto stopped in front of everyone, frowning severely. Stand back. Well back. They did as they were told. Even as Robin ushered everyone back a ways across the galley, already, Naruto was already concentrating. Swirls of fire were gathering around his hands and working their way up his arms, the flames suddenly growing hotter and more pronounced. He didn't unleash the energy, however. He held his hands above his head and closed his eyes, his mouth moving in a silent chant. The fire grew. White energy began to course around his body, lighting up the sky like it was daylight. He beckoned, his fingers crooking upward as they formed a claw. His hands shook, and it became obvious that the technique was difficult for Naruto to control. He gritted his teeth and clutched the sword tightly, and a halo of flames slowly surrounded him. Move. Nami didn't bother to ask why, because she'd already thrown herself to the deck. An instant later, a blaze of orange discharge swelled overhead and consumed her existence within a firestorm of travesty. The fireball, when it was unleashed, shook the entire ship. There was a massive flash of light and a roar of sound that deafened everyone, then the backlash of force from the blast all but throwing them back several feet. The clouds burst before him, boiling away as his lips parted for a single, solitary command. Heiken! Naruto roared, his knuckles bursting before the command. Summoning a spiraling pillar of flame, subsequently engulfing everything within a 3-mile radius. The fleet never stood a chance. A massive fist of heat and fire barreled forward, its jaws wide and gaping as it lurched toward its prey. Within 2 beats, the entire Navy fleet was all but decimated. Some were already sunk, others were still in the process capsizing, leaving sailors to flounder helplessly in the waters of the archipelago, and everyone else to wonder at the grisly aftermath of the attack. Sanji tried to take a smoke, only to realize his cigarette too hadn't escaped the blaze unharmed. He could only swear in disbelief as the cigar crumbled into nothingness, as it turned to ash in his mouth, leaving little more than a blackened stub between his teeth. When he went to reach for another one, he was dismayed to find that they too had been obliterated by the blast. That's a Nova gun. I've changed my mind. Usopp stammered aloud, performing a sudden and about face on his refusal to let Naruto join the crew. He can stay. That was super. Frankie laughed boisterously. I like this guy. He's a damned monster, just like those 3, Nami sobbed tearfully. It'll take a monster to kill someone like him. Monsters? Zolo asked blandly, utterly unfazed by the chaos. You mean us? Yes, I mean you. Sugoi. Chopper squeaked. He's just like Ace. Ace. Naruto half turned, a single ruby-red iris reappearing over his right shoulder as he regarded he who had spoken. He completed the revolution, jaw slackened, eyes widened. In the split second that it took him to turn around, he found himself face to face with his target. He couldn't believe his eyes. Luffy gawped. That was Ace's attack, just now. Oi, Naruto barked. Baka Yuru. Do I look like Portuguese D? Ace to you. Nanda. Luffy blinked, suddenly very much aware of the blonde standing at the helm of his ship. What was that? He squinted at the blonde whose body roiled and broiled like so much flame, and he found his words taken away as he recognized the color of those flames, because this was the very same power his brother had wielded, only this time on no circumstance could he be mistaken. Wait a minute. It couldn't be. No way. I've decided, Luffy announced. You'll be our fireman. Naruto's sweat dropped. Does a ship even need one of those? On my ship we do. Luffy reaffirmed enthusiastically. So, it's official. I'm part of the crew. Naruto asked. Luffy grinned. Sure. Everyone excluding Robin facefaulted. Damn it, Luffy. Miles away, Boke Hancock finally dared to draw a breath. So, that is Burning Will. Miles away, Hancock, who had been about to intervene on Luffy's behalf, gawped at the ruination that surrounded them. Within seconds, the entire Marine fleet had been reduced to little more than smoldering ashes. They'd been utterly decimated, all save for one. Peering through the spyglass, she abruptly realized that this particular ship was a great deal larger than that of its fellows. Also, someone was standing at the prow of that great and mighty battleship. Rather, two someones, both of whom bore the white coat of a Navy admiral. Their distinct yellow and red colorations could be seen, even from this distance. They were unmistakable, undeniable. At long last, the Navy had responded to the threat that Burning Will carried, though not as great a threat to Luffy as she feared, it was a different threat to which she desperately moved to intercept. Oh dear. Standing upon the prow of the mighty battle cruiser, Akainu sneered, confident of his triumph. This time, you won't escape me, Burning Will.